Hello and welcome to today's video. I've had the opportunity to look at thousands of different gut tests. I've also had the opportunity to work with the individuals of these gut tests to try to figure out what actually works. So my goal in today's video is to help you get a little bit more value out of that stool test that you might have done. And I'm going to try and share with you my philosophy in how I go about approaching these dysbiosis presentations. And there's one particular thing that I'm sort of fighting against today, which is something that unfortunately happens all of the time. So very often, I am not the first practitioner that somebody comes to work with. It's almost always the case that people will see other practitioners, naturopaths, functional doctors, and they'll have a bunch of testing and they'll bring that to me. And then we'll go over that together and take a look at it and try to figure out what to do. And almost always, when I am looking at a stool test and somebody has high levels of anything that's considered even vaguely pathogenic, this is almost always met with this just wall of antibiotics, of antimicrobial compounds, of allicin and oil of oregano, and all of these very potent antibiotic and antimicrobial agents. And as you can imagine, these people are coming to me because it didn't work. Doing this approach didn't work. So we need to try and find a different way, something else that does work. And I want to share that with you today. And hopefully, I really, really hope that I'm catching you before you've taken the antibiotics, before you've taken the oregano oil, the allicin, the garlic, all of these things. I'm hoping that I've caught you before you've taken all of these things. Because if I explain my philosophy and my mindset and my logic and rationale behind the approach that I've developed through a trial and error process of just trying to pay attention to what works and follow the results, hopefully we can get you some better results. So first of all different labs will provide you with different results. It's always important to consider the fact that these are also just a snapshot in time. If you test your stool right after an acute exposure to a toxin in your environment, or if you have a cold or a flu or a sickness, or if you've had food poisoning, or if you've had any kind of acute incident, even within 2 or 3 weeks of doing your stool test, it is going to affect your results. So you do need to bear that in mind. We also need to consider the fact that stool testing, I'll be honest, it is kind of bad. It's really not as good as you would expect. Sometimes I'm speaking with people and they show me their test and they're looking at these results as if they are the objective truth, and that's just simply not the case. Stool testing is in its infancy. We hardly know anything about the human gut, about the microbiome. We almost know nothing. Like, we probably know more about space than we do about the microbiome. And as a consequence, the way that we look at it, the lab tests that we have, the perspectives that we have, the understanding that we have on the gut and how to read microbiome tests is honestly is terrible. So it's really important that we always look at this like through a lens, with a grain of salt. We need to really understand that this is not the definitive truth. But let's say you have a stool test and you have some higher levels of some things that are generally considered over pathogens. This could include things like Blastocystis. This is like a pathogen. Most people get it from contaminated water. This is sometimes considered an over-objective pathogen. Although if you look into it, it looks like there are a lot of people that have this in the gut. It doesn't cause any symptoms. And actually the treatment that's recommended most of the time, and this isn't even my opinion, this is from research that I've done, is that there is no treatment. We don't take antibiotics for it. We don't do anything. As long as there are no symptoms presenting, we don't do anything. And you could also look at other things like Clostridia, which is considered potentially a pathogen, Candida, which can also be an opportunistic pathogen, Klebsiella, which is connected to some autoimmune problems and can be a histamine producer. These can all be potentially pathogenic organisms. So let's assume that you're looking at your stool test and you have one of these or some other type of potential pathogen slightly elevated. Most practitioners will jump on killing these things as being the solution, and this is exactly the opposite of what I'm going to suggest today. So before you try to directly kill anything, I want you to really scrutinize your test and see if there's anything that is low. Because very often, and this is a trend, this is a theme that I have seen over and over again, often the things that are considered objective pathogens or even opportunistic pathogens tend to be overgrown in a context where the natural and beneficial protective flora is missing. And what I see happening is the natural flora is missing, like the lactobacillus, the akkermansia, the faecalibacteria, the bifidobacterium, the natural organisms that are there that are designed to be healthful and protective. These organisms are missing. Then we come in and we try to kill the overt pathogens or the potentially pathogenic organisms. But what actually ends up happening is we decrease the diversity of the gut even more. These organisms that are missing, they're reduced even lower. Lactobacillus becomes zero, bifido becomes zero. And these are the organisms that are supposed to be the police officers, the orchestrators of the gut microbiome balance. And if they're missing, the gut just becomes imbalanced. And then we take antimicrobials. Yes, sure, we kill the Klebsiella, we kill the Clostridia, we kill the Candida, but we've now created this big space, and your gut is the most fertile place on earth to live. Gut bacteria, they love it here. It's warm, it's wet, there's food, it's amazing. They want to live here. And if we go in and we kill everything, but we don't put the correct organisms back in, all that's going to happen is we're going to move to a different dysbiosis presentation. And again, I've seen this over and over again. People will receive a treatment like antimicrobial agents, their SIBO symptoms go away, or the SIBO breath testing comes back negative, as in the tests all look great now, but their symptoms are 100 times worse. They're just objectively worse than they were before they did the antimicrobial treatment. And this is because we're looking at the gut microbiome incorrectly. We're understanding these labs incorrectly. So before you jump on board with any type of killing protocol, I really want you to ask a couple of questions. First of all, what is low and why is it low? Because if you've got some of these potentially or objectively pathogenic organisms, but you're, for example, missing your lactobacillus, if you have no growth lactobacillus, of course you're going to have pathogens because lactobacillus is what protects you. It produces things like lactic acid and hydrogen peroxide, and you don't really need to know what the exact substance is, but these healthful, beneficial organisms not only directly produce substances that kill pathogenic organisms, but they orchestrate the immune response. They communicate with the body and help it orchestrate the secretion of things like secretory IgA and all of these other immune impactful substances. So it's really important that we don't just jump in and try and nuke everything because it just doesn't work. I see it over and over again. And if you do that, if you jump in, you try and nuke it and it doesn't work, it actually takes longer to recover. It actually makes healing so much more difficult. And there's also this misconception that because these are natural substances like oil of oregano or allicin in garlic or grapefruit seed extract, or even something like colloidal silver, like these are more natural options, and that is true, but they still do the same thing. The strength and the health of your microbiome is dictated by the diversity of the organisms that you have there. And every time you take an antimicrobial agent, you are decreasing the overall diversity. And sure, maybe for something like oil of oregano, yes, it can be more antagonistic to pathogenic organisms, but it does kill your beneficial bacteria as well. There are certain organisms that are extremely important and are very sensitive to these types of antimicrobial agents. Organisms like Faecalibacteria prausnitzii and Oxalobacter formigens. These are really important organisms. And if you look at people that have very healthy guts, these organisms are in very good numbers. And almost always, when I look at somebody that has a gut dysbiosis presentation, and then they've tried to kill the pathogens using even natural substances like oil of oregano, allicin, caprylic acid, these types of things, their Oxalobacter is zero. And whilst Oxalobacter itself isn't the most important organism, it is a really good kind of test as to how healthy the microbiome is overall. And like I was exposed to mold for years. I took antibiotics for SIBO. I then followed it up with rounds and rounds and rounds of all the different types of antimicrobial agents, and my Oxalobacter is zero. And I see this over and over again. Again, it's not Oxalobacter itself that is super important, but it's an indicator because it's a very sensitive organism and it's even sensitive to these natural antimicrobial agents. And as I was saying earlier in the video, we hardly know anything about the gut. We really don't know what we're doing. We don't know what we're looking for. We don't know what we're testing. We don't know how accurate the testing is. But I can tell you, if these even natural antimicrobial agents damage these more sensitive organisms like Oxalobacter, I'm 100% sure that there are like 50, 100, 200, 500 other organisms that we don't even know what they are. We don't even know how they work, and they are influenced by these antimicrobial agents. And I don't have the science to back this up. I do not have any objective evidence, but you can wait 20 years, come back and watch this video, and you'll be like, oh, damn, he was right. He really knew what he was talking about. Because I see this in practice. I've seen this myself in my own personal life. I see this in my family. I see this in my coaching clients. And the thing is, science is really slow, and the microbiome is the next frontier. Like, we don't know much about it. So here's my overall suggestion for you. If you get a stool test back and you have potential pathogens or overt pathogens, before you kill anything, look for organisms that are low and try to figure out how you can increase them. More often than not, 40–50% of people just doing this alone provides benefit, provides symptom relief, and then if you retest, the pathogens have decreased. Maybe you're looking at your test and your lactobacillus looks normal, your bifidobacterium looks normal. Everything looks normal apart from you have potential pathogens, you have some organisms that are slightly elevated. Well, in this case, try a probiotic and see what happens. Because again, stool testing is not perfect. I have a lot of clients that do these stool tests, their lacto and bifido is in range, but they have pathogens. They take a lacto and bifido probiotic, even at a relatively low dose. You know I love the delactate-free probiotic. They start this at like half a baby scoop, and they're having crazy Herxheimer reactions. And it makes you think, well, if they really did have enough lacto and bifido, you wouldn't be seeing such a severe reaction to this. And again, you don't push through reactions, apply the Goldilocks zone principle, bring the dose back, work according to what the body is able to tolerate, and increase that dose gradually. But then what you end up seeing happening is all of these pathogens and all of these pathogen associated symptoms like SIBO and these other gut dysbiosis presentations, chronic fatigue syndrome, autoimmune issues, all of these things begin to go into remission by themselves without any direct attempt to kill the dysbiotic or the potentially pathogenic organisms whatsoever. So this then brings us to the place where we have to look at when it is actually appropriate to use these, let's say, like antibiotic and antimicrobial agents, because there are appropriate situations, but most people aren't doing it this way. So my suggestion would be do your stool test, have a look at what's low, try to get everything that's low up and above range, try to get it up and above the minimum range, get it into that ideal kind of spot. If you then have overt pathogens still, work on introducing probiotics and fermented foods at a therapeutic dose. So this could be somewhere between the range of 200 billion to a trillion CFUs, and various types of fermented foods if you're able to tolerate it. Things like kefir and kimchi, sauerkraut. Again, variety is the key here. The more variety we have, the more different organisms we're going to get, and the more of an influence it's going to have the benefit in the microbiome. If you're at the point where you do all of this and then you do another stool test and you're still seeing pathogenic organisms, this is when it would be appropriate to consider antimicrobial agents. But again, the way that I would do it would be very different. Instead of coming in with like this mega dose, this like nuclear bomb of oil of oregano, just start adding oregano to your food. Add it to your soups, to your stews, to your pizza, to your pasta. Add it to the foods that you would naturally add that to make it taste good. That alone has an antimicrobial effect. We can also add other things in, like for example, juicing. Juicing is amazing. It allows you to concentrate some of these antimicrobial substances, but it keeps them closer to the whole food matrix. They're also full of enzymes and nutrients, antioxidants, all these other things that don't just nuke and kill the microbiome, they also provide prebiotics and polyphenols and other things that can influence those other organisms that might be low. Even if they're not appearing low in the test, they might actually be low. And again, we're looking at this more from a balance perspective. We're not just trying to get everything to fit in range. We're trying to build the microbiome back up and put it into a state of balance. And if you reach this point and it's still not budging, and you know, almost this is almost no one. This very rarely happens. If you get to the point where we've worked through this process so methodically, we then have to start asking a couple of other questions. Like, for example, why is it necessary for this organism to be here? Is there some benefit that it is providing the body? Now, I know that sounds crazy, but a lot of the organisms that are considered pathogenic and potentially pathogenic can have potentially beneficial or adaptive mechanisms to help support the body. One of the most common things I see is everyone trying to kill parasites without this understanding that parasites bioaccumulate toxins like heavy metals. So if you have heavy metal toxicity, if you have amalgams in your teeth, if you're being exposed to environmental toxins, your body can employ these potentially or overtly pathogenic organisms with actually a probiotic function. They're coming into the body, to help it hold a state of homeostasis. And this bioaccumulation of heavy metals and toxins is just one example. But again, we hardly know anything about the gut, about the microbiome, about how all of this works, but it's worth investigating some of these extra things. We could also ask the question, is there something that you're eating that you're not able to digest? Because if you eat something and you can't digest it, your body will employ an organism to do it for you. This kind of ties into one of the recent SIBO videos that I made, where I was explaining that a lot of people aren't actually sensitive to foods, It's simply that they cannot digest the foods that they're eating. And again, if you're eating foods and you cannot digest it, you will develop a gut dysbiosis presentation. But in this case, it is an adaptive response. It is your body's attempt to adapt to a situation. So that's everything that I have for today's video. I hope this gives you a different perspective on how to approach this. And I'm really hoping that I managed to catch you before you nuked your microbiome, because I know everything that I do now. I'm sharing all of this with you because I made this exact mistake. You know, if I could go back in time and do it differently, I 100% would. But I can't. That's not really how it works. But what I can do is use all of that suffering and all of those mistakes and try to teach you and educate you so that you don't have to do it the same way that I did. Because it took me way longer to heal and way longer to make progress than I'm sure was actually necessary. But I was just figuring it out as I went, and I didn't really know what I was doing. And all of the expertise and the knowledge and the information that I have now is because I just made all the mistakes that I could along the way. And now I don't want you to make those same mistakes as well. So let me know if you have any questions. Let me know if you've had a similar experience, because this is way more common than you might think. I would say every second or third person that comes to talk to me is dealing with this exact situation that I'm outlining today. And if you want me to take a look at your stool test or go over your gut health situation and provide you a little bit of support and a roadmap so that we can figure out what do we actually do about it, feel free to shoot me an email, support@williamdickinson.co.uk, and I'll get back to you and we can schedule an appointment. So that's everything for me today. Hope you really enjoyed it. Take care. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.